So I want to thank Addie and Amber for all their work that they put into the last how many months of talking to us about hospitality. It was a really, really good series, and I got a lot out of it. And now we are in a pivotal point, and I'm doing an interim lesson because next week Aspen is going to pick up, and she's going to start a series on Colossians, which I'm very excited about. So this week, this is just kind of a standalone lesson, and it's something that I've been thinking about. And so I'm just going to dive right in. So have you ever had something happen to you in your life to make your faith waver? Something that kind of beat your faith up, beat you up or beat your faith off and made you question. I mean, I could start listing things, but you know, things like, miscarriages or death of a loved one, but sometimes it's even, just a fight with your husband or having trouble with your children or relationships that go sour, or it could be an illness or financial problems or loneliness. I mean, the list goes on of things that hit us, and then we just start thinking, does God care? Is he even listening to my prayers? Sometimes we get this nagging feeling that God's maybe disappointed in me. He's so disappointed that he's left me. I mean, there's 8.2 billion people on this earth, so he's pretty busy right now. And why would he be concerned about me and what I'm going through, right? Sometimes we start thinking, I don't pray enough. I don't read my Bible enough. I don't share my faith enough. I nag my husband, I snap at my children. I mean, he's got to be fed up with me too. Have you ever had any of those kind of thoughts? Or is it just me? And sometimes, after we've wallered a little bit in our self-thinking and our self-doubt, we come to our senses and go, we start counting our blessings, and we're Christians, we know who God is, but now we think, man, he must really be disappointed in me because I took that pathway. And it becomes this vicious cycle that we get on. The thing that gets me is that I could have been on a real high. We've all had those highs, right? You've had a high where things are good. I mean, things are really good. And you just think that you just wish it could stay this way, right? Things are really, really good. There's peace in the family. Our marriage is doing well. Sometimes you think, wow, I just couldn't get any better than this. And boom, almost overnight, something happens. A relationship takes a turn, and I can find myself actually thinking, where's God? Is he listening? I mean, just like a 180. I usually come to my senses pretty quickly and say, of course he's there, of course he's listening. But then I can feel very guilty. I'm thinking, how shallow is my faith that I would even have that thought to begin with? Well, there's several accounts in the Bible and about this, and I don't know how much, I'm trying to get this in this time frame, but I'm going to turn to 1 Kings chapter 18. It's kind of a lengthy read, but I'm just going to go ahead. This is about Elijah and the prophets of Baal. So 1 Kings 18, starting in verse 20. So Ahab sent to all the people of Israel and gathered the prophets together at Mount Carmel. And Elijah came near to all the people and said, how long will you go limping between these two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal, then follow him. And the people did not answer him a word. And then Elijah said to the people, even I only am left as a prophet of the Lord, but Baal's prophets number 450 men. Let 2 bulls be given to us, and let them choose 1 bull for themselves, and cut it into pieces, and lay it on the wood, and put no fire under it. I will prepare the other bull, and lay it on the wood, and put no fire to it. And you call on the name of your God, and I will call upon the name of the Lord, and the God who answers by fire. He is God. And all the people answered, it is well spoken. And Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose for yourselves 1 bull, prepare it first, for you are many, and call on the name of your God, and put no fire to it. And they took the bull that was given them, and they prepared it, and called on the name of Baal from morning till noon, saying, O Baal, answer us. And there was no voice. No one answered. And they limped around the altar they'd made. And at noon, Elijah mocked them, saying, "Cry louder. He's a god. Either he's amusing himself or relieving himself, or he's on a journey, or perhaps he's asleep and needs to be awakened." And they cried loud, and they cut themselves, as was their custom, with swords and lances until blood gushed out of them. And as midday passed, they raved on until the time of offering of oblation, but there was no voice. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah said to the people, "Come near to me." And all the people came near, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. Elijah took 12 stones, according to the number of tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord came, saying, "Israel shall be your name." And with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord. He made a trench about the altar as great as 2 seahs of seed, and he put wood on the altar and cut the bull into pieces and laid it on the wood. And he said, "Fill 4 jars with water, pour it on the burnt offering and wood." Then he said, "Do it a second time," and they did it. Then he said, "Do it a third time," and they did it. And then, verse 36, at the time of the offering of oblation, Elijah the prophet came and said, "O Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, that I am your servant, that I have done these things at your word. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know you, O Lord God, and that have turned their hearts back." Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and licked up the water in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." And Elijah said to them, "Seize the prophets of Baal, let not one of them escape." And they seized him, and Elijah brought them down to the brook of Kishon and slaughtered them there. So first, what I want you to look at with me is think about how great this victory was. Just think about how incredible this victory was. According to Elijah, how many prophets of Baal were there? 450. And according to Elijah, how many prophets of God were there? 1. So think about it. They could have, they got 450, and he's standing. And of course, the Israelites are kind of torn, and they're kind of following the Baal prophets, and so he's standing in a minority, right? These guys could have overcome him and take him out, and he'd be dead man, right? So it took a lot of faith. It took a lot of courage for him to stand up against these prophets, didn't it? It was a very, very bold proclamation to make when you're in the minority. So how much faith do you think that Elijah had to have to do this great thing? It's huge. I just can't even imagine. I know I get timid around people who aren't going to even kill me. So did you notice also about this story that the fire came down from heaven? What does fire usually do? Comes up, right? So the fire came down. There was no doubt who sent the fire, right? There's no trickery involved. And I have this section of a commentary that I wanted to read, but I'm kind of going to skip through that. But he was just saying how incredible and how incredible this victory was, how simple but thorough it was, that there's no questions about it. So Elijah was this great prophet, this great man of God, full of victory, full of faith. And we've read other things about him in the Bible. So what's this have to do with what I was talking about early, about whether God cares about us? Well, let's go on and read, and we're going to start in 1 Kings 19. So King Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, "So may the gods do to me, and even more so, if I do not make your life as the life of them by this time tomorrow." So he's saying, by tomorrow, you're going to be a dead man. So Elijah was afraid, and he arose, and he ran for his life, came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, left his servant there, and went on up a day's journey into the wilderness. So he was tired, he was hungry, and it says he sat down under a broom tree, and he asked the Lord that he might die. "It's enough," he said. "It's enough. Oh Lord, just Take my life, for I'm no better than my father's. And he lay down to sleep under this tree. So didn't we just say that Elijah was this great man of God, this great man of faith, this great prophet who had great victories? He had just experienced this incredible victory. And the very next day, he's scared for his life. He's totally discouraged. He's still talking to God, but his God somehow seems a little smaller today. He seems to think that this evil queen is stronger and more powerful than God, and she's obviously going to prevail. Look how quickly Elijah went from being this great man of victory and faith to wallowing in self-pity and discouragement. He was basically saying, Lord, don't you even care? You know, one of the hardest problems that we have as Christians is that what to do when God does not do what I've been taught to expect him to do. You got that?
Say it again.
Yeah. What do we do? What do we do when God doesn't do what we've been taught to expect him to do? What do we do when God gets out of line and doesn't act the way we think he ought to act? What do we do? Well, I couldn't help but think about Lazarus when he died. Lazarus, we know the story. He had the two sisters, Mary and Martha. They were very close to Jesus. They were very, very good friends. Jesus had eaten in their home, and they loved each other dearly. And when Lazarus got sick, the sisters begged Jesus, come. They had great faith. They knew he could heal their brother. And common sense would dictate that Jesus would drop whatever he was doing and run to his friends, right? He would run because he knew he could heal them, and they knew it. But instead, when he heard the bad news about his friend, he stayed a few more days. That's John 11:6. And Lazarus died. And Martha said to him when he finally arrived, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. Now, we know how this story ends. Mary and Martha at that time did not know how this story was going to end. Jesus came and raised him from the dead, right? But how do you think Mary and Martha were feeling? And what about the disciples? I mean, they knew how much Jesus loved Lazarus. And you can imagine them saying, Master, aren't we going to go? I mean, why aren't we going? We need to go. So what are we supposed to do when God doesn't act how we think he should act?
We're supposed to wait.
It's hard. It's hard. It is amazing how quickly we can get discouraged, and this discouragement can come over us, even if we saw a victory the day before, just like Elijah did. We left Elijah sniffling in self-pity under the broom tree. How do you think God must have felt about Elijah's behavior? I just gave you a great victory, right? I made you look good in front of everybody. I answered your prayer in front of everybody. Can't you just hang in there for one more day? Gee whiz, is this the way you're going to thank me? I mean, if this is the kind of prophet you're going to be, I'm just going to go find somebody else, right? I mean, we imagine God thinking all of these things about us, don't we? So if we go on in 1 Kings 19 in verse 5, it says, And Elijah lay down, and he slept under the broom tree. And behold, an angel touched him and said, Arise and eat. And he looked, and behold, there at his head was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate, and he drank, and he lay down. And then the angel of the Lord came to him again and touched him and said, Arise and eat, for your journey is too great for you. And he arose, and he ate, and he drank, and he went in the strength of that food for 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the Mount of God. So what did God do? Did he show disappointment? I just gave you victory, and now you're already lacking faith. Now you're already discouraged. No. What did he do? Did he give up on Elijah? What did he do?
That's what I do with my kids. You got a nap and a snack.
There you go. That's exact.
Sensory and emotional.
And then everything's okay, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Honestly. Yeah, that's why your flesh fails you. This is a reflection of like, my flesh and my intellect will continuously fail me. God is beyond my understanding, and he doesn't experience fleshly limitation like I
Yeah.
do. I need a nap and a snack.
And he knew, God knew exactly what he needed, right? So he sent an angel who was obviously very kind. He didn't reprimand him. He just said, I got food here for you, and gave him some nourishment, let him go back to sleep. I think guarding over him while he was asleep, because he knew somebody was after his life, right? He brings help in his discouragement. I just love this story. I think about it a lot. And he's such a loving God who never gave up on Elijah, and he never gives up on us. Sometimes his timing is not the same as our timing, is it? He tarried on purpose. When the story of Lazarus, he tarried on purpose to show them God's power and to show them God's glory. So waiting 4 days may have made Jesus late for a healing, but it made him right on time for a resurrection, didn't it? And that's just so important for us. It's so important if we pay attention to these things, if we pay attention at times when we don't understand. We might, when these things are difficult, we may begin to understand a little bit better that sometimes God's love tarries for our good. It always tarries for our good. If he's tarrying, it's for our good, and it's always for his glory. I think the thing I try to remember at a time like this is that my thinking and God's thinking are not the same. He tells us that. As much as I try to follow him, and as much as I try to read his word and to study and to line my thinking up with his, he says, my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts are higher than your thoughts. This incredibly perfect, good, infinite God will always have thoughts that are higher than ours. No matter how high we try to be in being like him, his thoughts are always going to be higher than ours. And we have trials in this life. Bad things happen to good people. Bad things happen to bad people. And we, who call ourselves Christians, don't get to escape life. It just happens. And when things don't go the way that we think that they should go, don't automatically think, God must be disappointed in me. He doesn't care. I mean, if he cared, he would fill in the blank. Remember, his ways are not our ways. And I love to think about how Lauren said, and we all probably have heard this multiple times, if something brings us closer to God, it's a blessing. If something pushes us away from God, it's a curse. So we may think, ooh, a windfall of money. Ooh, what a blessing. But if it takes us away from God, it is not a blessing. It's a curse. And then we may think, oh, a diagnosis of cancer. Oh, that's terrible. It's tragic. But if it brings the person closer to God, it's a blessing. And we need to think that way. I've talked many times in previous lessons about how important it is to get to know the character of God. So God's ways may not be our ways. They're not. Our ways, we are trying. We're trying to learn, and we're trying to grow, and we're trying to change, and we're trying to become more like Christ. God's ways may not be our ways, but his character is always dependable. Always dependable. He does care. How much does he care? Well, enough to send his son to pay for all of our sins so that we can live with him forever. It cost him everything to do this. He cares more for us than anyone ever could ever. You got that? Ever. And don't ever forget that. It's so important that we don't forget that. Discouragements come in our lives. Satan so desperately wants to get us to distracted and discouraged so that we can turn our backs on God. And we all have discouragements. I mean, they come. Just do not let that doubt fester. Don't ever let doubt fester. I mean, sometimes we will have our doubts. We have a big God. He can handle it. Talk to him about it. Talk to him, because doubt will turn into disbelief, and then we're in really big trouble. So take it to God. Elijah was very discouraged, but he still cried out to God, didn't he? And God brought him encouragement, and he'll bring us encouragement. He wants us to trust him and tell him what we're thinking, tell him what we're feeling, because if we have concerns and if we have questions, we need to take it to the one with the answers. God's the one with the answers. So remember, God's ways are not our ways. He does care. He cares more than anyone else cares. When you're discouraged, trust him, hold on tight, and that victory will come. Promise, it will come. I'm going to